when you talk about acquiring, you don't necessarily need to acquire art to be able to value it. But when we think of the word collector, it comes with the connotation that it's about acquiring art. So who is the young collector for you? Do they acquire art? Do they consume art? How do they engage with art for all of you? What have you noticed? You can take it.
So first of all, bad sales pitch for both of us because when we said that. Well, but truly, what I see a lot of in the last couple of years is that a lot of the younger people who have perhaps studied abroad, who've had now a sort of an experience of visiting museums and engaging with art on a very daily level, which is different from like the education system in India, which is changing now also. But I feel that they come back and then they want to invest back into their own culture. So I always say that, you know, if you're in your 30s, start acquiring artists who are in their 30s, you know, so you can see their trajectory as your own life journey continues. You'll see how they are growing, and, you know, you're supporting the arts not only by acquiring work and, you know, helping them, but that kind of money or that the worth of, you know, the work that you've acquired will help the artist build more. And so you will grow and the artist will grow. And, you know, I hope that answers a bit of your question, in the sense that collectors are not only about acquiring work for themselves, but they also help the ecosystem build.
Right.
So I have some stories of young students who've just returned from MBAs, or, you know, young lawyers who'll come and they'll hang around our shows. They'll come back again and again, visit it. And sometimes we speak to these kids, and, well, I'm calling them kids, sorry, but young adults, or and we'll be talking to them about what is it that they're getting. And sometimes it's a moment in their day that is just a pause from their very hectic lives. They're trying to figure and navigate existence, and they'll take a pause and come, be there, go back. Then they'll say, okay, we're going to be saving some money. Do you think that we could pay you over 4 months? The beautiful thing is that they're not looking at buying art to prove anything. Most of them are buying art to enjoy the process, to build and work in their community. When I say community, their age group and their art, the artists who are making, like, if they're 30, they're buying artists who are younger. I'm talking about, I'm being generic right now, so not all, but most. And for them, it's a conversation. It's literally about living an experience, a decision that they've made about the kind of life that they want to lead, and the decisions they make on their everyday about what is priority for them. So I see a wide variety of people becoming collectors, and pretty much from the age of 24 now. So it's quite fascinating to see. And this is like just a bit pre-COVID, but kind of COVID pushed it over the edge, because what we saw was so much isolation that people started developing passion that was not dependent on meeting other people, but actually delving into things that they could delve in their own time, and that would kind of speak to them back again.
Right.
So the experience of the art is speaking back to them.
Right.
So we've seen a big change through COVID.
Right. And this was actually my question to you as well. My next question was, as a gallerist, you know, how do you see galleries evolving to sort of help the younger generation engage with art? In the sense, do you think the youth, like you were mentioning, that, you know, people as young as the age of 24, they are sort of in the space right now, and do you think the youth comes to galleries, to art spaces, a little more informed and aware of the ways in which they want to consume art?
So again, it isn't a standard answer for that, because like Farah said, all the kids who've been abroad to study and come back, they're more sort of sensitized. The ones in India are getting sensitized because their peers are coming back and saying, oh, did you see this? Or it's part of a cool conversation to have about something they saw. Internationally, there are artist groups like Team Labs, etc. Or, you know, you saw Rafi Canadol. They've made it so interactive and immersive, digital, that younger, other kinds of kids are engaging with art practices. we have worked very hard on working on short snippet educational programs. We've done one, we just launched one with MAP, which is a Museum of Art and Photography, where it's a free course, anybody can go there and learn. So we're working with the ecosystem to dispense information that otherwise you would get from an ecosystem that had a lot of museums. But we're seeing a really large ecosystem push happening. Different cities have different kinds of museums coming up. Like Bombay has Mumbai Gallery Weekend happening. So many galleries here. Again, fabulous programming at Prince of Wales. There's a lot happening. And so you can choose to engage, interact. But I'm seeing more and more the younger generation wants to engage more. It is kind of, I'm going to use the word entertainment, but it's not the right word. But it's something they choose to do on a Saturday over hanging out in a mall.
Yeah.
Like mall culture is now not part of their daily thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you can call it like an experience, because that's what we're looking for. You know, maybe all of us younger audience can't afford, you know, the big 50 lakh painting or something like that, but we can afford to go on a Saturday to see gallery shows on Thursdays every month, you know. It also allows for us to meet other people, you know, like get to interact with people and also engage in the art, talk about it, and you kind of feel more inclusive in that sense, you know. I also feel that the millennials have kind of broadened the definition of art a little bit. At least in India, if you know, like back in the day, art was more like painting, sculpture kind of thing, you know. Now you've got like digital art that wasn't like, even like a few years back, a digital artist was struggling to figure out how to make money, right? Now we've got NFTs. So I think that's also broadened the definition of a collector. I would even say that like toys, you know, like luxury goods like shoes and things like that are also defined as art to a degree to like the broader younger public. So, yeah.
Actually, I'd like to add something here because you mentioned that I've
sure.
been here 18 years, but so has Aparajita and Jai has been collecting. So we are actually, you know, the younger of the millennial, the art world gatekeepers or so on, as they say. But let me tell you that in the last couple of years, what Instagram, for example, has done has really changed the way that a younger generation is looking at art. They do not need to ring a doorbell to enter a private gallery. You know, institutions like NMACC, for example, is making art very sexy by bringing artists like Andy Warhol, for example, you know. You also have Luxury Lifestyle Weekend where, you know, you have art which is dotting the whole space. Last year we were here. This year Prajita has brought a bunch of her artists. You have Art Mumbai, you have the India Art Fair, which is turning 15 years. So actually we've been around 18 years, more or less, and we've seen these changes happen. We have a platform called Cultivate Art, which uses Instagram as a very powerful tool. It may not reach the collectors, but definitely when you're scrolling through your phone, you know, something might pop up which will be interesting and you might go to that page. So I think a lot of galleries, institutions are using these tools which are more engaging for a younger audience now, which was not there like when we started. In fact, I always joke with my business partner and I always tell him that 20 years ago I couldn't find a decent website designer to design a website, and now you have, you know, everything is blockchain and so on and so on. You know, it's quite interesting with these things happening.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time right now where we are at. Like, because of social media, we can actually be part of the whole process. Like, we are not collecting artists just because someone else is telling us to go collect it. We know the process. We know the artist. We know how they function, what's the thought that's going inside creating each piece. Like most of the artists that I follow or peers of mine, they have a whole process given out, like in the stories, in the reels. They have a whole thought process, and the technical know-how is also very helpful. That kind of pushes you to go and be more close to that art form because you know the artist sort of like at the palm of your hand. At the same time, I've seen this whole I mean, thing legacy versus relevance situation happening. Like not every one of us, like not me, I can't afford a piece by Bacon or by any of the big artists, but I can definitely go and buy my friend's work. Like you said, the ecosystem is very relevant, and that's how we help each other. Like, and also over the last few years, I've seen there's a huge brand interest in branching out in a much more creative space. Like for example, like let's take this panel, like where Shiva's invested on all of us to go and talk about art and stuff like this. And the past like 10 years, I've done projects with over like almost 85 brands where all the briefs were art specific. So there's a huge market. It's not just like for an art collector, but also for the consumers to get in, to segue into the world of art through consumer products. Like you said about toys, bear bricks, for example. They're huge. I personally have a few of them, and they're cool, basically. And that buying a bear brick itself gives you a social currency among your peers. And that is an experience in itself. And I think because of that reason, right now, this whole relevance of collecting art has even grown exponentially.
I think there are two things that are happening, and I think COVID was very, very good for the art world. And I think that's kind of the funny secret of COVID is the art world exploded. We had 2 record years. I think that's one because people were sitting at home, they had time, they were like, okay, this is the 4 walls I'm with, I need to put something up that is a reflection of me and I can enjoy. So I think the second thing is that it was enabled, artists were able to really kind of work independently without having huge commitments and create incredible works. But the biggest thing and the biggest change is that they were able to connect directly with their end consumer. So through technology, which we all ramped up really quickly, through Instagram Live and Zooms and things like that, an artist could be in a safe space in their studio, but really talk to thousands of people at the same time, which is not possible in a gallery setting. I think that gave a lot of confidence to younger collectors to come into the fray. Because they were like, oh, this is actually a human being that I can connect with. I love what they're talking about. I need to spend more time following them. I need to spend time talking with them. I can actually engage with them. There were so many artists that I had hours and conversations for hours about, which I never did before, and I might have known them for 15 years. And I think that was a huge difference. The second thing is when young collectors come and ask me, like, what should I do? How should I get into this world? It's such a scary world. It's a very opaque world. I said, yes, it is an opaque world because it's grown to a kind of a very large scale, but it's actually still humans behind it. And I think the most important thing you can do today is actually go, see with your eyes, see what's going on, ask really relevant questions. People today know that they need to answer hard questions. And I think once we're being pushed to answer those questions, once again, I think because of what COVID happened, people were asking these questions in a world when people are not in the best of health. Like, can you read, where does art stand? Why are we even looking at this? Is this what we should prioritize? And what came out of that was that yes, the answer was yes to all these things. And just to piggyback on what Aparajita is saying is that not only are there fantastic properties like Mumbai Gallery Weekend and India Art Fair and things like that happening, the quality of the shows that are coming out today compared to 10 years ago, compared to 15 years ago is exponentially better. It's because the market has become mature and you really need to bring it. So the chances are if you're going to even the top 10 galleries in Bombay, you're walking into a really good show. I think the professionalism has had to be stepped up, the way you're interacting, the lighting, the show design, everything from the beginning to the end, it's a professional experience, which I think has also given a lot of confidence to people who have come back from abroad, who have come back and been like, okay, I need to really spend time here because they have really taken the quality of the work up, taken the work up. Artists I know themselves are feeling that pressure. which I think is a good thing because you want people to kind of be challenging themselves. I think gallerists themselves who are really taking in South Asian art to the rest of the world are achieving those goals. Look at the amount of international museums that are looking to South Asia, looking to engage with art in a more meaningful manner from over here, which was not happening before. So I think it's kind of it's a great time in the moment, but I think it really starts with engagement. It starts with asking hard questions and not second guessing yourself. Have the courage of your conviction. Get in there, ask questions, see. Don't worry, you'll get the answers. And if you don't get the answers, keep asking again. So I think young collectors are doing that, and I always encourage them to do that first. Like, make sure that you're ready to talk to an artist because they also want to engage with you at some level.
Right. Jai, with Art Vault, because that kind of lies, the work that Art Vault does, it sort of lies at the center of this entire discussion with collectors and, collection of art. What kind of clients do you get now with the younger generation sort of coming to the forefront of what we're talking about, of being collectors? What sort of people do you interact with more, and what kind of art and artists are sort of finding more and more space in your facilities?
I think the biggest change that I've seen is the amount of professionals who have entered the art world in terms of collecting. So before, I think it was dominated more by like promoter-based companies or industrialists who were collecting kind of voraciously and annually in a bigger way. And then when we built the Art Vault to be a state-of-the-art facility, those were the type of people who are coming with us and saying, look, my collection has reached a certain amount and I need it to be professionally managed and taken care of. Because one of the main things that I also believe in is you buying something is easy, but you have to have you need to then take care of it. That becomes your responsibility. But in India, that infrastructure didn't exist, so that was kind of the initial reason I built the Art Vault. But now what I'm loving to see is that you have professionals who are who have been coming in from their 20s and 30s into galleries, ready to and galleries are doing an incredible job to encourage that, even if they're paying in installments, to say, look, I know this painting is coming in, I don't have space for it, but I love it, can you please help me store it? And that's been a huge change. I was talking to, we had the Art Mumbai recently, and there were a bunch of people who store with me, and they were like, oh, my Christmas bonus is coming in, I'm buying a piece of art. And I think that conversation maybe before would be like, okay, I'm buying a car, or I'm buying a piece of jewelry, and they're like, no, I want to buy a piece of art, what should I get over here? And I loved that. I thought that was so exciting. Aparajita, what do you think?
And it's not only about the Delhi and Bombay. We're seeing movement now from Nagpur and from Surat and from cities indoor. Like we're seeing people emerge from cities that we have never particularly paid attention to, but they're paying attention. And actually, you can drill it down to the India moment. What we're seeing is a massive inflection point for India. The kind of wealth, the kind of growth that's happening here, it's not restricted to a few. We're seeing money filter down to a huge number of people. And those people are seeing very carefully about how they want to spend it. Once they're done with the regular modes of aspiration, they're looking at art.
Right.
So anyway, to wrap that thought up, it's just that what we're seeing today is, I think 5 years from now, if we had this conversation, we'd say the art market is going to go at least 10 times its size in the next 5 years. And I'm being very conservative by what I'm saying. We have seen exponential growth. And it's coming from many places. It's not a person dependent. And that's a really good marker of things to come.
Right.
I want to add one more thing here is that 10 years ago, I think there were the young collectors who were looking into collecting art of their own region or their own country. And what is exciting now is that you have a lot of collectors who are just collecting artists from the global, from all over the world. I mean, you have collectors who are flying to Art Basel, Miami, or Frieze, and they don't necessarily need to buy artists of their own region or their own country. In fact, I believe that Shilpa Gupta, one of our greatest younger contemporary artists, she's going to be showing at the Ukrainian pavilion at the Venice Biennale. So it's quite interesting that, maybe it started around like buying into your own age group and your own country, and now it's much more than that, right?
Right. Do you want to take that? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess obviously social media has kind of allowed it to become global, right? Like we've grown up online, and because of that, like we're always on our phones, like you said, like it's right in our palms. So, yeah.
So there's been a certain amount of democratization of this space, right? Like that's what I gather, of course. And you just mentioned, Aparajita, that it's not restricted to just the cities, the usual suspects like the Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore and all. And it's sort of percolated down to cities and places that we weren't really thinking about actively. So, when it comes to that, Santanu, you hail from Guwahati, and, have you noticed something of that sort? Have you noticed these shifts happening from within the spaces that you've come from? And like Aparajita said, we weren't really looking at these parts of the country, but do you see people turning their eye towards?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
There's a huge rise in awareness. I would say awareness around this whole topic or this whole concept as a whole, like collectors, art. Because where I come from, like I literally growing up, I had no idea that art is a profession or something. It's something like a hobby. And that's what I've been told all my life. But being exposed to a bigger art world, or maybe going outside and observing those things, there's a huge change in trend, and especially because of social media. And those trends involve creating awareness around the ecosystem that art has or the art world has. Like for example, like I'm just taking examples from my city, because Guwahati is a very small town. There's not many galleries. I think there's only 1 or 2 galleries there. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to bridge that gap. Like I'm part of this collective called Guwahati Art Project, and we are building that narrative, putting forward, giving platform to artists who are coming from really remote parts of the country, like small villages, small towns where there's lack of awareness, there's no one talking about this, there's no dialogue. So I can see it's sporadic in nature, but there is definitely conversations happening in places that we won't imagine there would be a whole art scene happening there. Like
also between vernacular art and contemporary art. You had Shanti Bai exhibiting at NMACC, and a lot of people were not aware of her greatness, of her art, And now you have all the, like I said, vernacular art, contemporary art, design. I think it's, like you said already, there's a very interesting movement.
That's exactly my point, that now the centers have been decentralized. They haven't lost being the focal points, but what we're seeing is a lot more talent having the opportunity to showcase themselves. And so when we may get like 5 PDFs a day from artists. Earlier it might have been 5 in a week, now we're getting 5 a day. The talent was always there in the country. They just have more confidence, and they have an ability on how to present themselves, and technology has helped tremendously. So the point of contact with whether it's your consumer or the artist, has been phenomenal.
I mean, there's an example I like to cite, because now this is about the whole art, like people buying art, collecting art. Like there's also a very big social statement that comes with small towns and artists who belong from small towns. What I've seen, there is a river island called Majuli.
Yeah, of course.
And it's
Sattriya, it's
yes,
the birthplace
the
of
Sattriya art form.
Yeah.
So there is a movement of street art movement that's happening in a river island. where they're only talking about the erosion that's actually like eroding the whole island away.
Exactly.
And there is it's called the living art movement, and there's a bunch of artists who are friends of mine. They're traveling around different villages teaching art, and through art they're speaking of a problem, they're speaking for a social issue, an environmental issue. So there is an awareness in the artists from these areas that art can be used as a tool for social reform. Now that's a whole different angle that has risen up over the last few years or decades.
Right.
I think that's kind of going back to the thing why when you talk about is the necessity of art is because it can straddle platforms, it can straddle communities, it can straddle different economic classes that something else could not do. If somebody cannot read, write, but they can see. And when they can see, they can learn. And I think that actually that heritage and that culture is already in India. We have papyrus books that are 2,000 years old. That was what they were seeing. This is how many religions prospered around India, but how stories and villages stayed alive. So I think this is it's a great now. It can be used for social reform, and it becomes a lot more relevant, and the spreadability becomes a lot more because of obviously of social media. But I think it's also shouldn't be taken away that it's not a fad in any way. It's something that has been built over time, and now we've been able to kind of combine what's happening on the ground level and what's happening in technology together, and I think that's really going to change.
Right. And this just for a second, I want to digress a little because we've been talking about the marriage of art and technology, etc. For a hot second, we thought the future of art is NFT, and what really happened with that is what I want to understand from the experts here.
You want me to take it or you want to go for it?
Whoever wants to go first.
Nobody's going to touch that, I think.
No, I don't have a problem touching it. So I think that what the technology is still in the hot moment.
Yeah.
I think the technology is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think the future will depend on using blockchain or a technology to
Yes.
certify art. Case in point, the new case that happened again, very well-known massive financier has done a legal case against people saying that he bought 20 crores worth of fake art.
Yes.
It's exactly for things like that we will need provenance checks and we will need technology to certify it. So I think technology stays bang on, point on. What will always fade away in every bubble is the crap that is being sold at the high because of a tide.
Right.
And content is always king.
Of course, yeah.
Quality is always king. Good quality, good content will survive.
Doesn't matter what form it shows up in.
It doesn't matter
right?
what
Yeah.
form. It's when something is bubbling up and everybody else is riding the wave, that's what's going to crash. So
Right.
I have absolute faith in the technology and I have faith in great art. The rest will come and go.
Right.
I feel NFTs also help with trading in the sense of the certificate of authenticity, because that allows, I feel also younger people might go into trading art more frequently than like the older who are kind of going for an investment than an emotion. And that's why the trading would also be kind of helpful.
That's the whole age group who grew up trading Pokemons, for example, for Game Boy Advance, right? So when we had those, we would trade Pokemons. Right now, that's why all these factors have sort of blended into the whole idea of pop art. Now, pop art's not about what Andy Warhol did. It's about Pokemons, for example.
Yeah, like
And
Daniel
the whole concept
Armstrong.
of trading NFTs and everything is sort of a derivative of that whole nostalgia factor to it. Like how we used to trade Pokemons or maybe even Tamagotchis for that matter.
Yeah.
So I think there is a sense of nostalgia attached to that, which sort of makes it even more sellable.
Right. Is there anyone who wants to talk
Yeah,
about?
actually, I second absolutely what Aparajita said, that it's a no-brainer. Art is a very good case study, for technology and blockchain, but everything in less than 5 years will have a token. I mean, you have already seen that credit cards do have that. And it's a no-brainer that, it'll be the future. And in the next 15 years, when we all are still around and we'll still be the young generation, we'll see that change as well. I mean, the changes have been rapid now. At one point of time, there was not even an authenticity certificate. And that can also be faked. If a painting can be faked, that's the easiest thing to fake, But I think that the younger generation of artists are adapting to technology better. They're understanding what blockchain is and how this is going to be the differentiator in the future for this industry,
So you do think that blockchain, with the advent of blockchain in the world of art, it's been disruptive in a good way, right? It has been.
I don't think we've seen the end
End
kind of
of
version
it.
of it.
Yeah.
I think the version we've seen right now was very premature. And I think to Aparajita's point is like the end version of it is going to be very meaningful, but it's going to take time. Anything that's new takes time. You cannot go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
You're going to go 0 to -5 to -10 back to 7.
It's not a linear curve.
It's not, and I think there's so many different ideas out there. It's a great way to kind of build in more stability and make the ecosystem more mature. Because I think, to her point, is that you're also then speaking the language to a younger collector and they become more comfortable with it, But we haven't seen that final version yet.
But I think it'll be a much shorter time than what we've seen in the last 18 years, let's say, The changes that we've seen have taken a longer time than what we'll see now.
The other thing is, there's certain laws in India that don't allow, let's say, tokenization of an art piece, which we're seeing in the States now with a concept called Masterpiece, where you can buy fragments or sections of a Warhol, and you can trade that. So technology allows a lot to happen and allows a lot more wealth to come into the segment. So it's complex and it's lots of things involved with each other, but I think that governments will sort it out and they'll figure a way of dealing with each other on crypto and on Ethereum, like you say. At some point when they figure it out, I think that's when we'll see the next bump up.
Right. What I actually find really fascinating about what the blockchain technology, what NFTs really did with art, was that we always sort of had this thing of art being a very tactile experience, right? And from there, especially when you see it from the point of view of a collector, and from there when you sort of take it to the digital space, that's the kind of, I think, the bridge that was being gapped with the technologies that have...
It actually wasn't only a digital piece of art. So
of course,
there was, in my experience, one of the first works that we sold was a bamboo work by an artist called Asim Waqif. And now everybody knows that bamboo is going to deteriorate and disappear.
Disintegrate,
So eventually, what is a collector buying? Because the tactile part is going to disappear. So they're buying a contract, essentially. And if that contract is on blockchain, it just makes it in perpetuity. Otherwise, a piece of paper can disappear. So then there's another work that was bought by the Art Institute of Chicago, a work by Jitish Kalat, which is a speech in LEDs. Now the LED bulb is going to get spoiled. So what does a museum buy? So the museum has bought a contract. And contract and technology just makes it so much easier because everything else gets lost. But once this is coded in, it stays. Of course, we won't get into how technology has to be updated, etc., etc. But we just have to get to more foolproof systems on protecting people who are buying things other than physical paintings.
Exactly.
It's a wide array of things that can be bought, or artists can, like land art. There's so many things that exist that can be traded only if there is a certain purchase. What do you purchase?
Exactly.
So you have to purchase something.
Precisely the question.
Exactly.
Yes. Where the tactile bit is sort of
if the tactile bit is not there,
exactly,
this is what you purchase, and
correct,
then you can keep remaking it.
Right. So it's almost like making a commitment in perpetuity.
Exactly.
To what you really believe in artistically.
So there is this conversation actually, there's a fun, interesting thing that came up in my mind. Is right now there is a whole shift to collecting stuff in video games.
Right, yes.
Right. And what has happened right now is esports and people who
Yeah.
are associated with esports have a huge overflow of money. They have a huge capital, they have huge finances. And what are they doing right now? Just spending and collecting stuff online in the world of video games.
Right.
And and how they're doing it and where's the legality of it, it's a very gray area.
Very great, yeah.
Now, how are we supposed to? It's a question because I want to like ask this question. How do we see them as collectors because they're collecting concept arts, they're collecting character arts, they're trading those stuff. Now, should we consider them as young collectors?
100%. There are people who collect coins. There are people who collect stamps. Everybody doesn't have to collect fine art or painting, right?
Exactly.
So there are all sorts of collectors. There are people who collect jewelry. There are people who collect. They are not necessary art buyers, and I think that's why a platform like LLW, for example, you have people who come in for the fashion, but they're looking at a work of art.
Yeah.
It might resonate with them, may not. They might just cross and not even look at it. But there are people who can spend an X amount of money on a watch. They are the same people who can invest in art, who can invest
Exactly,
in,
yeah.
Balenciaga sneakers or whatever you might say. So, so there is a lot of people out there now. Everybody, the collector is such a large, wide term.
Term, exactly.
Wine collectors. I mean, what do you mean?
What
They
do you collect?
spend
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands. So if you look at a Christie's or a Sotheby's, then you see that, actually in the contemporary or Indian modern and contemporary department is so small. It's a drop in the ocean as compared to if they sell one Rothko, or two
Yeah.
Rothkos makes up the entire Indian art market, So of course they are collectors, and we consider them collectors. And sooner or later they may want to buy a painting, or they may not, But of course there is an engagement with contemporary culture.
So you're widening the purview of what the word collector and what the word investment really means. Investment isn't just in the terms of money. It's not just that. We are investing our energies, our thoughts, and like you said, when through blockchain, there's nothing tactile. We're sort of investing. We're making a commitment to a thought, perhaps. So how do you kind of put a price tag on an idea? That's a question for
Ultimately,
all of you.
everything it starts with an idea, right? And then it depends on execution of that.
Yeah, but when it sort of gets a material form, I think you can
No,
still
but
put
like
a value.
I'm
Can
going to
you?
go back to Asim's work.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an idea. It was an
Yeah.
executed idea which would perish, but it can be
Yeah.
recreated.
Right.
So there is a certain value for an idea, but there's a greater value for an executed idea.
Right.
And the value that is commanded is of an executed idea.
Right.
So we are still looking at executed ideas being
Okay.
traded.
I just want to take one step back, and I think a lot of people, especially when the NFT market disintegrated, people were said like, well, this is the end, this is it. And I think what was actually, if we really look back one step before that and the digitization of the greatest museums in the world is because people were like, we don't know how long COVID's going to last, but let's keep the museum doors open. Let's see it online. Which really encouraged people to do that, and museums themselves did that, which brought on things that had never been photographed before, had never been put online before, and people could experience them. But I do agree with Farah that as soon as COVID ended, people were back at the door and wanting to experience something in real life. They're opening and they want to get inside. They wanted to see things. Museums were overflowing as soon as they opened. People were not happy with just an online presence or a digital presence. And I think collectors are okay today to understand that this is the limitation of this artwork. If I'm going to, and even with video artworks, there are video artworks that I've had which were on CDs, which now have been to USBs, and now they've gone to cloud. So these artists keep on sending you emails like, well, I've got a new, and it's great because I'm like, they have to stay relevant to the time because that's what it is. But I think the question comes is like, what happens to Namjoon Paik or something like that, who the work was meant to be viewed on a 1978 television. Now, when that tube is not made anymore, and he's like, I'll never want to make that word digital again. Where I think in that sense, what Aparajita says stands true. Then it's like becomes a contract. It changes the entire flow of it. It keeps it authentic and makes it even rarer. And thus it becomes an investment through that.
Right. It brings me to the next question, which is mostly for the artists among us. We have Yaazd and Santanu. With investment, we also touch upon the idea of patronage, patrons. And do you think privately owned art, in a sense, is probably antithetical to the idea of democratizing art? Is it antithetical to it, privately owned art? Do you want to take it? Yes.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely.
The idea is that, if you want to open up art to more and more people, does private patronage or privately owned art, is that sort of an antithesis? Does it stand principally opposite to the idea of democratization of art?
It really depends, right? Like maybe one of these big collectors who privately owns one of my works, for example, is meeting and showing this piece to many people who probably have the funds to buy my work. Probably a good situation for me. I would also love for it to be in a museum, and that would be a different demographic as well, right? Like that would be the people who are probably, say, younger, who are going not to buy but to see, and who learn about me and who learn about the work as well. So I don't think it's like black or white. I think it's kind of a gray space, and you have to kind of learn to maneuver it and like go through the world pretty much.
Shantanu?
Yeah, I think it is very situational. I mean, for me, whatever helps me make more art, I'll side with that. As simple as that. Like,
Right.
for me, my art should survive.
Yeah.
And how it survives, I really don't care.
Okay.
Be it like, be it a consumer product in every household, be it in a museum, or be it privately owned by someone. Like, it hardly matters to me. For me, what's important is that I have the capacity, the capability to keep making art. And whoever's the end consumer, whoever's consuming it, it's okay to go to whoever appreciates and wants to invest in it, it's fine. I have no issues with that. But having said that, like in today's world, the modern day patronage is a very, how to put it, a very capitalistic endeavor in itself. Like, for example, we have, for example, right now, modern day brands, consumer brands, can be considered as sort of patrons of art forms, which actually helps the artist to create more artwork.
Right.
And that's like a very tangible situation, because for me, I don't sell most of my artworks.
Okay.
I just love to paint. I keep them with myself. I'm kind of attached to it. But I have done so many other projects that I have the sort of leverage to not sell my art piece, but I actually can do other consumer end products and other projects which actually provides for me. It makes me enough money to do experiment with my own art form. And the moment there's a recognition of people who actually, or a gallery who would like to represent that art form, or I can connect with it, I'm more than happy to display it with them. But my end goal is not selling at this point, and that's my take on this.
Right. And this just brings me to the next part of this question, that as artists, you've kind of answered it quite a bit, like you said, Shantanu, that you don't sell most of your work. But then as artists today in 2024, as compared to maybe even say a decade ago, with the proliferation of social media, etc., are you lesser dependent on, say, the gallery networks or representation by galleries, etc., to actually make art economically viable for yourselves?
I think in my entire career, I've only worked with 2 galleries, and just for shows. I
Right.
had never intended to sell any of
Right,
that.
right.
I just did it for showing and for the experience. Because I just had like a lot of paintings and I wanted to
Right.
just put it out there. But I've done it independently, that's the thing. For me, my way was through other means because I had no awareness, I had no insight into any of the art world. So for me, the tools that I had was just social media, uh, word of mouth, and basically goodwill. And I've leveraged those three things for almost a decade, and I've made my art survive and relevant in a way that everyone could recognize it.
Right.
So I think it's a lot of hard work, I would say that.
Of course.
But it also, and it's very situational. See, for example, I'm able to sort of think in on those lines, like marketing, the business side of it. There's always a lot of smartness associated, a design process associated in making a style relevant. So for me, it's that design process. And I'm able to sort of work around it. I'm still working on it. And then, yeah, it helped me survive all this while. I'm probably going to figure out something else soon.
Right. So, Yaazd, for you?
Yeah, I feel like social media definitely has opened up the space for way more artists to come in, even if that's to be seen by galleries or to be seen by the world as a whole. It's made it like international altogether. Like it's not that if I'm showing with a gallery in Mumbai, only Mumbai is seeing it.
Right.
It's like, and you also see so many artists who have like 100K followers more
Yeah.
than like galleries even, right? So they have like this viewing, and they maybe even if they show at a gallery, they might get more sales from their own Instagram or something like that. So yeah, it definitely has opened it up. I think like someone said gatekeeping, and I think
Yes.
that's also kind
Yeah.
of opened that space up a little bit for younger artists as a whole.
Right.
Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry, wanted to add there as well that, there are a lot of younger gallerists and also people who are not traditionally from the art world who are now a part of the art world. So, so it's sort of opening different doors. When I meant to say gatekeepers, I meant the old guard, who was here
Yeah,
and
the
they were
older
so
guards, yeah.
closed about everything. And now you have, for example, I didn't study, I studied painting, but I studied business. And then I got into the art world. And I think so was Aparajita in that sense. And I know somebody else who was working in the travel industry. And he opened a gallery, I think, in his late 40s. Ashwin, right? Isa. So it's a lot of people who are not traditionally from the families and, and that it's sort of like something that you have been, given this platform. There are a lot of people who are now in the art world who are first generation art
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, whether they're curators or gallerists. So I think, it's a very exciting time. And like Aparajita mentioned earlier, that there are collectors also from smaller places, but there are amazing curators and thoughts and ideas coming out of these places as well. I mean, the Northeast, for example, is amazing, whether it's fashion or, those
Absolutely, yeah.
people on Instagram, they're just brilliant, those, their concepts, their ideas. And they're so thoughtful about the political and social system, which is very important
Yeah.
as well in the conversation. It can't just be about collecting. What are you collecting? You're collecting
Yeah.
your contemporary times.
I think it depends on. I want to say something about this is because I think it depends on the artist and what their goal is. When artists ask me for advice, I say work with a good gallerist. Why do we say that? It's because some artists are not able to market their work. Some artists do not have the verbiage to talk about their work and access the type of people that need to be seeing it. And I think a gallerist, a good gallerist, can do all those things. And they say, you do what you need to do and give them the freedom to do what you need to do. I think that's really, really important. And I know as a gallerist you shouldn't have to, so I'm saying that, but I do believe that very much so, is that I think it makes a huge difference, especially especially when you're India is still, we're still growing, but as soon as you hit Europe and North America, the first question they ask you is, who's your gallery? Who's your gallery? Then the curator comes. There are still very much gatekeepers involved in that world. But if you're like, you know what, that doesn't make a difference to me, and as an artist, I don't care about that, I don't want to be in this biennale, I don't want to be in that biennale, I'll figure it out, great, no problem. But I think the good thing is that what's happening today is that every avenue is possible. And it just depends on who you are as an artist, what you're producing, and what needs to be done. And sometimes some of the best works of artists, even today, there's an incredible work at the Sassoon Docks, which is a 7-channel video, and the artists are a collective, and the first thing they said was like, we couldn't have done this without our gallerist. To get government permissions, to get the funding involved, and things like that. So sometimes a gallerist is not only looking at the sales, but they're actually getting the infrastructure into place to make something really incredible come to life. So I think it straddles both worlds.
Ways, right. And one of my final questions is, we were just talking about how artists are constantly collaborating with brands at all times to sort of give that touch of luxury to the art that they create. What do you have to say about that? Because when artists or people in the ecosystem, when they sort of team up to, say, put art on a commodity which is sold, retailed, do the rules of creation of art, etc., do they change in any way?
We've had some experience in that. One of our artists worked with Dior.
Right.
Another artist worked with an alcohol brand. Different people have worked. It's generally that those brands have art programs that they're working with, where either they're focusing on craft or they're focusing towards building entire collection with keeping their brand in mind as well. So it's an adaptation. There's pros and cons, and there's lots of positive and negative press one receives. Louis Vuitton did something with Kusama. It had its huge followers, and it had its huge number of people who just hated it. But the truth is that people who never knew about Kusama got to know about Kusama because of the bag. So now I don't know whether that's good or bad. It's the lens with which you look at it. But I think that often brands help in taking the art. Art is essentially, intellectual art is intellectual, and therefore very few people get it.
Yeah, true.
And hence, for it to percolate beyond the usual suspect, sometimes you need
to make it more accessible.
Yeah, you need more generic brands to take it out there.
Right.
So that's, I don't have an opinion on it, but it's the truth, and we work around it.
Okay. And
yeah, actually, I was also involved in a project such like yours, Aparajita, where we commissioned Shilpa Gupta a number of years ago to create a trophy for a leadership award.
Right.
And it was really cheeky and funny, which is unlike her work.
Yeah.
But it was awarded to, the likes of Ratan Tata and Shah Rukh Khan.
Right.
It was the most well-attended award. And of course, it had a little note in it that, this is an artwork by Shilpa Gupta, and they were so used to this ugly kind of trophy. And so they all looked at it, and it was interesting to see their reactions once it looked like a chips packet.
Okay.
But it said change on it.
Right.
And they were the change makers, so they could look at their reflection on a chips packet. It was quite funny.
Right.
And so I think that what she said earlier, that it goes beyond the small circle, and I still call it small, of the art world people, whether they're collectors or curators or people who consume art. I think it's fabulous. I think it's actually one of the best things that brands, luxury brands, who know how to market this well. Also, I think the gallerists are very important in this, and the artists are also very important. They must understand that where it's going to go and how long this is going to last. Like you said, Yayoi, it's such a iconic bag, right? Or even Bharti Kher's bag, for example. Or Ritika Merchant did one with Chloe, which was fantastic. So I think Indian artists are having a moment with luxury brands, and I think it's fabulous.
Right.
I'm definitely for this. Because, I mean, also for me, it's a very situational thing. Because, for example, with Shivas, I had done a bunch of sneakers, like a bunch of luxury sneakers which got launched last year.
Okay.
And that is a commodity in itself.
Yeah.
And there is always, in this ecosystem of artists, like there's always a thing called, oh, you're a sellout. Like, basically, that's hard to hear. Like, oh, you're a sellout,
Yeah.
you're doing this. Or, where's your establishment?
Yeah, it's an allegation
Fire
always
in
brought.
you. And like,
Yeah.
I'm like, but that's not going to pay my bills. Simple as
Exactly.
that. And I'm not reaching that. I'm not using already the ecosystem and the marketing and the network that these brands have, right? Now, for example, now I could have never, like I did a global project with Red Bull, and I never imagined those works, my artwork would end up in Van Gogh Museum or Moco Museum.
Yeah.
But that happened. Even though it happened through a consumer product or a brand, but it happened, right? The goal was sort of met. I could have never been in a situation like that. So that way, I think I consider the modern day patrons for artists like us to be brands like this who actually give you the freedom to play around and do things like this, where you can actually explore and get those opportunities which are rarely bestowed upon to artists like us.
Right. Jai?
I think it's great. I think as an artist there are no rules, and if that works for you, that works for you. I don't think you can say anything else besides that. I think you're seeing some incredible artists do some enormous thing, and some of the biggest luxury brand house in the world owns some of the best museums.
Right.
So it's two sides of the same coin, and there are no rules anymore.
Yaazd, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it works for some. It doesn't work for some.
Does it work for you?
I haven't really worked with any big brand yet.
But are you open to it?
Yeah, 100%. I think it opens up like viewing of my work to so many other people that wouldn't see it normally. So I wouldn't say no. It should work with what I believe in as well, though. And I wouldn't just do anything just for the sake of it. But yeah.
Right. So those were my questions, and I think we just have enough time for this. To conclude the final session, I'd just like to say thank you so much to all of you for joining me for this conversation. And no matter in what form, shape, I just hope people keep investing in art and people just keep investing in artists at all times. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arshia. Thank you, everyone.